Most people think of homeowners associations as just another part of neighborhood life until they end up on the receiving end of a fine. That's exactly what happened to Sarah, a busy mom of three living in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Her front yard wasn't messy, just a little overgrown after a few rainy weeks. But that's all it took for the HOA to slip a notice under her door, threatening a hefty fine if things weren't fixed in 48 hours. With her husband out of town and no time or extra money to hire help, Sarah knew she had to act fast or pay up. But here's where things get interesting. Instead of panicking, Sarah got creative. She came up with a simple, clever hack that not only avoided the fine, but left her neighbors, and even the HOA board, completely stunned. No one saw it coming, and the best part, she managed to pull it off using stuff she already had around the house. In this video, we're diving into Sarah's unexpected solution, the surprising reaction from her HOA, and how her story is now making waves in her community. It's a feel-good moment with a twist, but just when it seems like the problem's solved, something unexpected happens that changes everything. Sarah had always been the kind of neighbor who kept to herself, friendly but busy, juggling work-from-home meetings, school pickups, and endless laundry piles. She never expected to get on the HOA's radar, especially over something as simple as a patchy front lawn. But when the warning letter arrived, it felt more personal than procedural. It wasn't just a reminder, it was a threat. A $150 fine if her yard wasn't restored to community standards by Friday afternoon. The problem? The rain had flooded their old lawnmower's engine, and with her husband away on a work trip, she had no backup plan. Lawn services were booked out, and the clock was ticking. That's when Sarah remembered something in the garage, an old stash of artificial turf from a DIY project she'd never finished. It wasn't perfect, and it definitely wasn't going to cover the whole yard. But maybe, just maybe, she could use it in a way that gave the appearance of a freshly cut, HOA-approved lawn. So, late that night, while her kids were asleep, Sarah got to work. What she pulled off in just a few hours was half lawn fix, half optical illusion. And by morning, her yard looked almost too good. So good, in fact, that it caught the eye of someone unexpected, and not in the way she hoped. The next morning, Sarah felt a small sense of victory when she stepped outside. The artificial turf, though patchy in places, gave her yard a tidy, almost flawless appearance from the street. She could already imagine the HOA's next letter, maybe a small apology, or at least a nod of approval. But as she turned the corner of the house, her heart skipped a beat. Standing at the foot of her driveway was Mr. Reynolds, the HOA president, holding a clipboard and scanning her front yard with a sharp, scrutinizing gaze. It was clear from the moment he stepped onto her property that Sarah's quick fix had caught his attention for all the wrong reasons. He took one step closer to her lawn, his eyes narrowing, and then paused, making notes on his clipboard. Sarah's stomach sank. Was he going to call her out on it? The whole point was for the turf to blend in and fool anyone who wasn't looking too closely. But it didn't seem like Mr. Reynolds was falling for the illusion. "Good morning, Mrs. Jacobs," he said, his tone polite but tinged with suspicion. "I see you've made some changes to the front yard." She tried to smile, but the tension was thick. "Yes, just trying to keep up with the landscaping requirements," she said, trying to sound casual. But his eyes didn't leave the artificial turf. "I think we may need to have a further discussion about your solution here. We pride ourselves on keeping the neighborhood looking natural. You know the rules." Her heart pounded. The rules. He was going to call her out. What she had done wasn't exactly natural. It was a quick fix, yes. But was it enough to dodge the fine? Would he let it slide? Or was she about to find herself in deeper trouble than before? Before Sarah could say another word, Mr. Reynolds scribbled something on his clipboard and gave her a tight-lipped smile. "I'll be in touch," he said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. As he walked back down the driveway, Sarah's mind raced. What had just happened? Had he figured out her trick? Or was he going to use this as leverage to push for more strict compliance with the HOA guidelines? Either way, one thing was certain: this wasn't over yet. The next few days felt like a slow countdown to something she couldn't control. Sarah kept expecting the worst: a knock at the door, an official notice in the mailbox, maybe even a formal hearing with the HOA board. Each morning, she walked outside with a sense of dread, half expecting to see Mr. Reynolds standing there again, clipboard in hand, ready to pounce on her so-called solution. She didn't sleep much that week. Between work, the kids, and the ever-looming threat of the HOA, her mind kept spinning. Was the turf going to be enough? She'd covered as much of the front yard as she could, but there were still areas where the grass underneath peeked through. She couldn't afford to get it perfect. She was already running low on both time and money. And now, with Mr. Reynolds watching her every move, she wasn't sure what to do next. Then, a call came in from her neighbor, Linda, who lived 2 doors down. "Sarah, I don't know if you saw, but Mr. Reynolds is over at the park right now. He's talking to some of the other HOA members. They've got a meeting planned, and it looks like he's making a big deal out of your yard." Her pulse raced. Sarah hadn't been able to shake the feeling that something was building, something bigger than just a simple fine. Linda continued, her voice dropping. "They're talking about taking it further. Some of the others want to give you a formal warning, maybe even more." Sarah's thoughts whirled. A warning was one thing, but a formal charge? That meant a hearing, and if the HOA was involved, there was no telling how far they'd push this. What if this turned into a full-blown fight, one that would drag her entire family into the middle of it? With every passing hour, the situation felt more out of her control. Her mind raced through possible plans, but none of them seemed good enough. Was the HOA right to hold her accountable? Was she breaking the rules, or had she done what was necessary to avoid an unreasonable fine? And just when she thought she might be able to breathe again, her phone buzzed. It was a notification from the HOA's website, an official post announcing a special community meeting. And guess who was at the center of the agenda? Sarah stared at her phone, the words on the HOA's community meeting post searing into her brain. Agenda Item 1, Property Violation Report, Sarah Jacobs. Her heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just some casual complaint anymore. The HOA was taking her front yard issue to an official meeting. Not only was her reputation on the line, but now her neighbors would be involved too. Everyone would know about her hack and the controversies surrounding it. She sat frozen for a moment, gripping the phone in her hand. A formal hearing. She hadn't prepared for this. She thought she could handle a fine, maybe even a warning, but this felt like something bigger. It was turning into a full-blown neighborhood spectacle. Would they come after her for other violations? Would they use this as an example to tighten their grip on the entire community? The weight of it all pressed down on her chest. Just as Sarah was about to start planning for the worst, another text came through, this one from Linda again. "Sarah, listen, there's something you need to know. I overheard Mr. Reynolds talking to the board. They're not just upset about the turf. They found something else, something that could make this whole thing a lot worse for you." Her mind raced. What else could they possibly be upset about? The yard, the turf wasn't even that noticeable. But then Linda dropped the bombshell. "I heard them mention your backyard. They're saying it doesn't meet the HOA's guidelines either, and if they get involved, they'll inspect everything." Panic surged through Sarah. The backyard, she hadn't even thought about it. It wasn't perfect, but it was private, her personal space. It had a few garden tools scattered around and some uneven patches of grass. Nothing that could possibly be an issue, or so she thought. But now it wasn't just about the front yard. If the HOA started inspecting every corner of her property, who knew what they'd find? Could they hit her with fines for every small imperfection? Was this really about the rules, or were they just looking for a reason to make an example of her? With the meeting approaching, Sarah knew she had to act fast. But she was quickly realizing that no matter what she did, the situation was spiraling beyond her control, and the stakes were rising higher than she'd ever imagined. The day of the community meeting arrived, and Sarah's nerves were shot. She spent hours that morning pacing, running through potential defenses in her head, trying to figure out what she could possibly say to make things right. The HOA was set to vote on her property violation, and the pressure was suffocating. If the board decided against her, not only would she face the fine, but the chance of further inspections on her property seemed almost inevitable. When Sarah entered the community center, the room was packed with neighbors, some with curious expressions, others more judgmental. Mr. Reynolds was already sitting at the head of the table, his eyes scanning the room like a hawk. Her stomach flipped as he caught sight of her. He didn't smile. There was no warmth, just a cold, calculating stare. This wasn't just about rules anymore. This was personal. The meeting began with the usual formalities, but it didn't take long for Sarah's name to come up. Mr. Reynolds addressed the crowd, his voice steady but filled with thinly veiled disapproval. "We have a situation here," he began, pointing to a slide of Sarah's front yard on the projector. Ms. Jacobs attempted to sidestep our community guidelines with what appears to be a temporary turf solution. Sarah felt every eye on her as she sat quietly, trying to stay calm. He laid out all the reasons her patchwork solution was a violation, but then something unexpected happened. Linda, the neighbor who had warned Sarah earlier, stood up, her voice clear and firm. "Actually, I've been living next door to Sarah for years, and if anyone knows how hard she's worked to keep up with these rules, it's me. What she did wasn't perfect, but it was a quick fix in an emergency. We've all done things to make sure we don't get fined." The room fell silent. Sarah's heart thudded in her chest. Linda wasn't done yet. Besides, this issue with the yard isn't as big a deal as you're making it out to be. Why are we letting something so small tear our community apart? For a brief moment, the room seemed to shift. A few neighbors nodded in agreement. Mr. Reynolds shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his lips tightening. But then, just as Sarah thought things were looking up, a new voice interrupted. It was Mrs. Hargrave, a longtime board member, who had kept mostly quiet until now. "Linda's right to a point," she said, her voice sharp. "But the issue is much bigger than one yard. Sarah isn't the only one bending the rules around here. If we let this slide, we're opening the door for more problems. The board can't just overlook violations, or we lose control of the community entirely." The tension in the room shot up again. It was clear the HOA wasn't about to back down easily. But then, as Sarah braced herself for the worst, something even more unexpected happened. Mr. Reynolds, who had been quiet for several minutes, stood up. "We've discussed this enough," he said, his voice now almost uncertain. "I think it's time for a vote." The board members cast their votes quickly, and the results were read aloud. The majority voted in Sarah's favor. No fine, no formal penalty. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was enough to ease the pressure. Sarah exhaled in relief, her hands trembling as she held onto the chair in front of her. But just as the meeting seemed to be winding down, Mr. Reynolds added one final chilling comment. "There's just one more thing. Sarah, I've been made aware of some other issues around your property. There's a security camera footage from a neighbor showing something you might want to address." The room fell silent again. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. What was he talking about? Her mind raced. And just when she thought she'd gotten out of the woods, the final twist landed like a bomb. The footage showed Sarah, not in her yard, but at night, sneaking into a neighbor's backyard and tampering with something. The footage didn't make sense. It was a complete surprise. The entire room gasped. Was this something to do with her lawn? Or was there more to the story than she had realized? The room buzzed with whispers, and Sarah's heart raced as she tried to make sense of what she had just heard. The footage had to be a mistake. She had never gone into anyone's backyard at night. There must be a misunderstanding. Her mind scrambled for answers, but Mr. Reynolds wasn't letting up. "I think we need to investigate this further," he said, his tone cold. But then, to everyone's surprise, Mrs. Hargrave stood up again, her voice cutting through the tension. "I think we've made enough of a spectacle out of one neighbor's yard. If there's something else going on, we'll deal with it privately. For now, let's just move on." After a long, awkward silence, the meeting adjourned, leaving everyone with more questions than answers. Sarah was left in a daze, her emotions torn between relief and confusion. Later that evening, Linda called, filling in the final piece of the puzzle. The footage wasn't from Sarah's yard. It was from a neighbor's security camera showing someone else entirely, using her shovel to move a few garden tools around. It had been an innocent mistake, but it was enough to set off a chain of events. In the end, Sarah avoided the fine, and the HOA backed off. But she learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes, the smallest thing can snowball, and it's the people around you who can either make or break you.